at Queensbridge High, a prestigious secondary school in Lagos, where privilege walked the halls like royalty and poverty lurked in the shadows. The morning bell rang over the chatter of students in crisp uniforms. The courtyard buzzed with the usual gossip, cliques gathering in familiar corners, their laughter as sharp as their judgment. Tari Johnson, 14, moved through the scene like a whisper, her oversized uniform hanging loosely on her thin frame. Her shoes scuffed, her bag patched in 3 places. She kept her eyes low, her pace steady, hoping to pass unnoticed. But as always, invisibility was a luxury she couldn't afford. From a bench beneath the jacaranda tree, a group of wealthier students lounged, their blazers sharp, their sneakers imported. Ugo Chukwuma, 15, loud and boastful, noticed her first. With a cruel grin, he pointed her out. "See the way she walks, like poverty itself has legs." The others burst into laughter, a cruel chorus that echoed across the open space. Tari stiffened but didn't pause. Her jaw tightened, her fists clenched around the straps of her bag, but she kept walking, straight-backed, silent. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Later that day, under a blazing Lagos sun, the swimming pool shimmered behind the sports building. It was time for swimming class, or, for most students, an excuse to lounge poolside while pretending to care about strokes and kicks. Tari sat alone on a bench near the edge, her back to the others, sketching quietly in a worn journal. Her pencil moved fast, a practiced escape into lines and shadows, away from laughter that always cut. She never swam with the others, not because she couldn't, but because it was easier not to be seen. The pool deck was noisy, splashing, chatter, music leaking from someone's speaker. Then, without warning, came the scream. "He's drowning," a girl shouted. Everyone froze. Heads turned toward the deep end, where Hugo thrashed wildly, arms flailing, face bobbing above the water in panic. The lifeguard, inexplicably absent, was nowhere in sight. The laughter from earlier had vanished, replaced with frightened murmurs and hesitant steps toward the edge. No one moved to help, and then a flash of motion. Tari dropped her bag and ran, shoving past frozen students. Without hesitation, she dove cleanly into the pool, her form slicing through the water with practiced confidence. Seconds later, she reached Ugo, who was now gasping, sinking. She grabbed him from behind, locked his arms, and kicked powerfully toward the surface. They broke through. He coughed, sputtering, wide-eyed with fear as she dragged him to the side, clinging to the edge with both hands. A teacher came running. The lifeguard returned, breathless and panicked. Students stood around in stunned silence. Ugo, still crying and trembling, looked up, not at the crowd, but at the girl who'd just saved him. Tari stood soaked, her braids plastered to her forehead, her uniform shirt clinging to her skinny frame. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The same girl he'd mocked that morning had just pulled him from death, and in that still, breathless moment, every hierarchy Queensbridge worshipped cracked a little at the edges. Tari Johnson's world existed in stark contrast to the sprawling, polished halls of Queensbridge High. By day, she walked among wealth and privilege, unnoticed and less mocked. But by night, she returned to the cramped one-room apartment she shared with her mother in Their home was more patchwork than structure cracks in the wall, a ceiling fan that hadn't worked in years, and a single kerosene stove they used with care. Her mother, whom everyone simply called Mama Tari, was a roadside akara seller, rising before dawn to grind beans, light her coal pot, and secure her corner on the street. She worked tirelessly, her hands always busy, her eyes tired but never dimmed. She was a widow, her husband Tari's father lost in a factory fire when Tari was just 5. Since then, survival had become their only ritual. Tari's scholarship to Queensbridge was a lifeline, a miracle carved from grit and brilliance. She had scored nearly perfect marks on the government placement test, and her art portfolio had moved one of the school's administrators to tears. Still, brilliance wasn't armor. Her daily reality was a study in contrast. At school, she wore oversized second-hand uniforms with seams carefully stitched by Mama Tari's hand. Her shoes were often the wrong brand, her accent the wrong texture, her food wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. She learned to keep her head down, to sit at the back, to disappear behind notebooks and the occasional sketch. Her eyes were always scanning, alert for jokes disguised as compliments, for whispers that turned into laughter as she walked past. And at the center of much of that laughter was Ugo Chukwuma. Ugo, with his flawless fade and designer sneakers, ruled Queensbridge's social food chain. He was the son of the school's head prefect, and Mrs. Chukwuma, former beauty queen turned influential society woman with fingers in every social circle worth knowing. Ugo was charming, quick with his words, and even quicker with his mockery. But beneath his golden boy mask lay a crumbling sense of worth. His father was a ghost, in his life always away on business, rarely present at school events or even birthday dinners. At home, Ugo was a disappointment, never quite handsome enough, never tall enough, never polished enough to live up to the legacy his mother had mapped out for him. And so, at school, he performed. He threw around his privilege like armor, bullying others to protect his own fragile shell of power. If he could make others feel small, he could keep himself feeling big. Tari was an easy target. She never fought back, never raised her voice. Her silence was misread as weakness, her invisibility as permission. Yet what none of them knew was that while they scrolled through filtered selfies and TikTok trends, Tari disappeared into worlds she created herself. Her evenings were spent curled in the corner of their bed, sketching in worn-out notebooks filled with stories and portraits. She drew everyone her mother bent over the coal pot, the young woman who sold plantains with a baby tied to her back, even Ugo, frozen mid-laugh, his eyes shaded in doubt and defiance. She read poetry by flashlight, reread Chinua Achebe and Wole Soyinka like scripture, and recited lines under her breath as if they were spells to carry her through. Tari never wanted attention. She had no interest in standing out. Her plan was simple: stay quiet, get her education, protect her mother, and escape this life. But the day she jumped into the pool and saved the very boy who ridiculed her, everything shifted. Suddenly, the girl who had always moved through Queensbridge like a shadow now stood in the center of its gossip. Whispers followed her, not of poverty or pity, but of bravery. Some students looked at her differently. A few offered quiet nods of respect. Even the teachers, usually indifferent, asked if she was okay. Ugo, who had once led the charge against her, now walked the halls more subdued, glancing her way with something bordering on shame. Tar, I hadn't asked for this. She hadn't tried to change her place in their world. But in that single act, without thinking, without pausing, she had rewritten something. She had forced everyone, even for a moment, to see her, not as poverty with legs, but as someone who mattered. And as the days passed, she began to wonder if maybe silence wasn't the only way to survive. Maybe, just maybe, she had a voice worth hearing. The whispers began almost immediately after the incident at the pool. Tari saved Ugo's life, they said, in corridors and stairwells, during recess, and in hushed tones at the school gate. It rippled through Queensbridge like wind through dry leaves, impossible to stop, unsettling to those who had built their identities on hierarchy. Tari Johnson, the girl who had always blended into the margins, suddenly had the whole school looking at her differently. Teachers nodded at her in the halls. A few classmates began to greet her, awkwardly but sincerely. Even junior students watched her with wide-eyed curiosity. But amid all the attention, there was one voice, noticeably silent Ugo's, when he Returned to school 3 days after the drowning incident. Everyone expected something, anything. A thank you in front of class, a public acknowledgement at assembly, even a quiet word by her locker. But Ugo said nothing. He avoided eye contact, ducked into different corridors, and changed seats during lunch. When she passed him in the hallway, he looked past her as if she were made of glass. Tari wasn't sure what hurt more, the silence or the cowardice of it. She hadn't saved him for praise, but to act like it had never happened, like she didn't exist, that burned in ways she hadn't expected. Then came Thursday morning, a day like any other till it wasn't. It was during social studies class, and the teacher had stepped out briefly. Noise filled the room, laughter bouncing between desks, and in the chaos, one boy noticed her sketchpad sticking out from her backpack. Before Tari could react, it was snatched and passed around like a stolen secret. She stood up, her face draining of color, her voice frozen behind clenched teeth. "Return it," she said softly, but no one listened. "Mad, oh, this one can draw," a boy mocked, flipping through the pages exaggeratedly. The pad passed from hand to hand, and then somehow it landed in Ugo's lap. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. Tari's heart raced so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She braced herself for what she thought would come next. Another round of jokes, a loud, cruel laugh, maybe a torn page thrown back at her. Ugo flipped through the sketches, portraits shaded with a quiet intensity, faces of classmates, people from the market, even one of him, drawn from memory, his expression unreadable. He turned the pages slowly, absorbing each one. He looked up at Tari. "Who drew these?" he asked, his voice low, the usual smirk absent. Tari stood still, her hands clenched at her sides. "I did," she said, barely audible. Ugo stared at her for a second longer, then nodded once, gently closed the sketchpad, stood up, and walked over. Without a word, he placed it on her desk and walked away. No jokes, no insults, just silence. It was the first time he had truly seen her not as a target, not as a joke, but as someone who had something powerful and rare. And though he didn't say thank you that day, something had shifted between them, and fragile and real. Something had changed. It wasn't loud or immediate, but it was steady like a tide rolling in beneath the surface. Ugo stopped laughing when the others mocked Tari. He stopped tossing her name around in jokes. Once, when a junior boy tried to mimic her accent in the hallway, Ugo walked past and muttered just loud enough, "That's not funny." He didn't shout, he didn't fight, but something in his tone made the laughter stop. Tari noticed it. Everyone did. He no longer joined the pack. No more subtle jabs, no offhand smirks. He sat differently now, in class, quieter, distant even from his usual circle. But Tari wasn't ready to see it as anything but a trick. She avoided his eyes, changed routes between classes, and kept her head low. It felt like a trap, one kind word away from being humiliated again. Then, one humid Thursday afternoon, after school let out, Tari was walking her usual route home down the dusty road, past the corner bucker, around the broken street lamp with its buzzing wires. That's when she heard footsteps behind her, fast and hesitant. She turned. It was Ugo. "Wait, Tari, please," he said, out of breath. She stopped, tense, already bracing for whatever this was. He stood awkwardly, hands deep in his pockets. "I just need to say something." She didn't speak. "I don't know why you saved me," he blurted, voice cracking. "Because I wouldn't have saved you." The words landed like stones in her chest. Her first instinct was to walk away, but something, curiosity, confusion, maybe something deeper, kept her feet still. "I panicked in that water," he continued. "I thought I was going to die, and everyone just stood there. I saw faces I thought were my friends, just watching. But you," he swallowed hard, "you helped. The one person I treated like dirt." His voice broke then, and to Terry's shock, tears welled in his eyes. "You don't know what it's like," he said, his tone hollow, "to feel completely fake every single day. My dad left months ago. No warning, just left. My mum's been acting like nothing happened. She still throws parties, posts selfies, like we're some perfect family, but at home, it's just me. Empty rooms, empty everything." Tori's mouth parted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. She couldn't. "I started acting out, 'cause it was the only time I felt seen. Hurting people made me feel real. I thought if they laughed with me, I mattered. But then you pulled me out of that water and didn't say anything. You didn't throw it in my face. You just saved me." There was a long silence. The wind shifted through the alley, carrying the scent of fried plantain and wet sand. Ugo looked smaller, now like a boy stripped of the armor he'd spent years building. "I didn't deserve it," he whispered. "Tar." I felt something strange move in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. She saw now that the boy, who once made her feel invisible, was battling his own type of invisibility. His cruelty had been a scream for attention, a cover for the emptiness inside him. And now, for the first time, he had no shield. "I didn't save you for you," she said softly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Ugo nodded. "I know, that's why it meant everything." They stood there, two broken kids in the late Lagos sun. The power that once tilted sharply in his favor, now leveled by vulnerability. For once, Tari wasn't the one holding her breath, Ugo was. And that silence between them wasn't painful. It was honest. The announcement came over the school intercom. With the usual crackle, all students are invited to submit entries for the Queensbridge annual art exhibition. This year's theme, identity and reflection. Submissions close in 2 weeks. Tari barely looked up from her notebook. Art competitions were for students who were seen, heard, celebrated. She preferred the corners, the safe spaces. No one noticed. That way, nothing could be taken from her. But Ugo heard the announcement too, and something sparked. He had watched Tari's sketches for weeks, quiet, deliberate strokes that captured more emotion than most people could speak. The world needed to see what she saw, what she felt. He knew she would never enter herself, so he took a chance. Quietly, one afternoon after she forgot her sketchbook in class, he scanned a few pages, filled out the entry form, and submitted them under her name. When she found out after, a poster went up with her name. Printed on the contestant list, she stormed to his locker. "You had no right," she snapped, her voice low and sharp. Yu-Gi-Oh turned, guilt already on his face. No, I'm sorry, but I couldn't let you hide this." She looked like she might hit him. More cry, maybe both. "You hide your talent," he said gently, "the same way I used to hide my pain. But you, Tari, your drawings are like windows. Let people see through them. Let them see you, please." Tari didn't respond immediately. Her fingers tightened around her books. But later that night, she opened her sketchpad and stared at the empty page for a long time. Then she began to draw. The piece she finally submitted was titled "What I See When I Look at Myself." It depicted a drowning boy, his eyes wild with fear. His hand just above the surface and a girl pulling him upward, her face steady and calm. It was unmistakably them. The final day of the exhibition arrived. The school hall was transformed into a gallery. Parents, students, teachers milled around, sipping juice, murmuring thoughts about brushwork and technique. Tari stood in the back, hands trembling slightly, as her drawing hung in the center of the room under soft yellow light. People stopped and stared longer than they did at any other piece. The emotions in the pencil lines were undeniable. Then, unexpectedly, Hugo stepped onto the small stage where the mic sat, unannounced. The chatter died down. All eyes turned to him. He took a deep breath. "I never thought I'd be up here," he began, voice shaking. "Not like this." He looked across the room, found Tari, and didn't look away. I used to think strength meant making others feel small. I thought respect came from fear. I bullied someone in this room, someone better than me in every way. A wave of murmurs moved through the audience. Hugo raised his hand to quiet them. Tari Johnson saved my life. That day in the pool, yes, but also in the days after. She showed me what courage really looks like. She taught me that being kind isn't weakness. It's strength, real strength. His voice cracked, and he swallowed hard. I was a coward, and I'm sorry. Then, unexpectedly, tears spilled down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. The hall fell into stunned silence. No laughter, no whispers. Just the stillness of truth filling every space. I felt something shift inside her. Not just relief, but recognition. For once, the world didn't just see, hurt, understood her. Not because she screamed, not because she fought back, but because her truth had finally been spoken by the last person she ever expected. And somehow, that made it louder than anything else. When the winners of the art exhibition were announced the following week, Tari didn't expect anything. She stood near the back of the school hall, arms crossed, heart guarded. But when the headmistress cleared her throat and said, "First prize and a full scholarship to the Lagos Arts Conservatory goes to Tari Johnson," the room erupted into stunned applause. Tari froze, her sketchbook clutched to her chest as heads turned. For a moment, she couldn't move. Then her mother, standing near the door in her flower-stained apron, let out a soft, trembling cheer. Tari walked to the stage, not smiling yet, but something deep inside her shifted. For the first time, she stood tall, in the days that followed. Her life began to change in small, steady ways. The scholarship meant she would soon leave Queensbridge, trading taunts and whispers for canvas and colour. But something even more surprising began to grow quietly between her and Hugo. Not romance, something gentler. He apologized to her, not just once, but many times, without drama, without expectation, just a boy learning the weight of his actions. Slowly and humbly, he started therapy, his own decision, and, while he didn't talk about it much, his eyes were different now, softer, sharper in the right ways. He began joining Mama Tari on some Saturdays, helping fry akara and handle customers. With clumsy hands and a quiet smile. His old friends laughed behind his back, called him soft. From prefect to akara boy, someone sneered. But Hugo didn't flinch anymore. "Maybe soft is what I needed to be," he told Tari once. Hard was just a mask. Meanwhile, Tari, once invisible, began to guide others who reminded her of her old self, girls who hugged their books too tightly, who never raised their hands in class, who walked like shadows. She would find them during breaks and quietly say, "You draw, let me see," or "You want to write something together." In those moments, her strength wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. The same hands that once sketched her pain now reached out to lift others from it. Yu-Gi-Oh! No longer. The loudest voice in the room began to listen. Truly listen. He learned the stories behind the eyes he used to overlook. He learned when to speak, when to stay quiet, and when to just sit beside someone in silence. Tari's world had not suddenly become perfect. She still returned to a cramped home with a leaking roof. Her mother still worked too hard for too little, but now, hope lived in the space between struggle and success. A hope carved not from fairy tales, but from truth, from growth, from seeing and being seen. And in that, shared understanding between a once bullied girl who found her voice and a broken boy learning to rebuild something new began. Not just change, but healing. Graduation day arrives with a bright Lagos sun casting golden light over the packed auditorium. Tari steps forward, heart pounding, as her name is called to receive the award for outstanding achievement in the arts. The applause swells around her, a wave she never imagined feeling as she crosses the stage with steady steps, her sketchbook tucked under her arm like a secret talisman. In the crowd, her eyes catch a familiar figure, Hugo, standing near the back, holding a handmade sign that reads, "The girl who saved me twice." Her lips curl into a genuine smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they've traveled together, from pain, fear, and misunderstanding to growth, respect, and healing. As the ceremony continues around her, her thoughts drift to the fragile strength that carried her here, and the unexpected bond that helped him find his way as well. A voiceover whispers, gently, "Sometimes saving someone else is how we learn to save ourselves." The screen fades to black, leaving behind a lingering sense of hope, redemption, and the quiet power of compassion.